So today we're going to break down William G. Bryant's deep dive investigation into the hidden economic engine of Atlanta. He's really asking a huge question. In a city, who creates value? And maybe more importantly, who actually gets to keep it? Let's get into it. You know, this whole thing really kicks off with a puzzle that the author just couldn't solve at first. He's looking around Atlanta and seeing black people in major positions of power. We're talking mayors, police chiefs, judges. And yet, at the same time, the city's jails were just overwhelmingly full of black citizens. And that contradiction, well, that's what made him start digging. So how does Bryant answer that question? Well, that's what we're here to find out. We're going to walk through his findings step by step to understand the mechanics of this system he claims is running just beneath the surface. All right, first up, Atlanta's central paradox. Let's really dig into that core contradiction, because according to the author, it's not just an observation. It's the key that unlocks the whole thing. And when you look at the numbers, they're just stark. In Fulton County, the black population is about 45%, but the jail population, 91% black. Now for Bryant, this wasn't just another statistic about inequality. To him, it was a clue, a sign that something else, a different kind of system, was going on. And here's where things get really interesting, because his whole perspective just shifts. He stopped looking at these two facts, black political power and black mass incarceration, as being in conflict. He started thinking, what if they're not in conflict? What if they're two parts of the same machine actually working together? This one idea leads him straight to his main theory. So, to make sense of all this, to solve this paradox, Bryant comes up with this key concept, a word that's central to his whole analysis, the proxy. So let's break down what he means by that. Okay, so what is a proxy? According to the author, it's basically a human shock absorber. Think of them as a buffer. Their job is to stand in the gap, to take the hits and absorb all the chaos and friction in a system so that the real value extraction can happen smoothly, and the people and the assets at the very top stay completely protected. And Bryant has this really simple test to figure out who's a proxy and who's just labor. He calls it the chaos test. Think of it this way. If a janitor doesn't show up for work, things just get dirty. That's labor. But if a security guard doesn't show up, the feeling of safety disappears. Maybe insurance rates get affected, and the value of the asset they're protecting immediately drops. That, he says, is a proxy. All right, so we've got the theory. Now let's see how Bryant actually applies it to real-world Atlanta, to what he calls the extraction machine. His first example, Exhibit A, takes us into the world of high-end real estate and the folks who are paid to keep it safe. Okay, picture this. A security guard at a fancy condo in Midtown Atlanta. The author points out their wage is $18.50 an hour. Seems pretty standard, right? A decent wage for a really important job? But then, he puts this number next to it. Based on real estate data, he calculates that just one empty condo in that same building is appreciating, it's going up in value at a rate of $48 an hour. That's right, the empty room is making more than 2.5 times the person paid to guard it. And that leads to his big conclusion here. You are not guarding the building. You are guarding the appreciation. You see, the guard's real job in this view isn't to protect bricks and mortar. It's to create the stability that allows the financial value of that asset to just keep growing, untouched. They're guarding the money. Okay, Exhibit B. Now the author takes a look at something you might not expect. One of Atlanta's most celebrated projects, the Beltline. And he argues it's just another powerful part of this extraction machine. So Bryant unpacks how the financing works, a thing called a tax allocation district, or TAD. And according to him, it's a 4-step process. First, they freeze property taxes in the area at an old 2005 level. Then they capture all the future tax increases and use that money to fund the Beltline. Step 3, this new development creates value. The parks and trails make the whole area more desirable, which leads to the final step, displace. The soaring property values and taxes end up pricing out longtime residents who are often black. And was there a real-world impact? Well, take a look at the old 4th Ward, a neighborhood right on the Beltline. The black population there dropped from 4,500 down to just 1,500 in 50 years, and the author points out that this drop really sped up right after the trail was built. All right, now for Exhibit C. And this is probably the author's most provocative idea. He calls it the melanin shield. So here's the author's take. He argues that when you have black officials in positions of authority, they end up acting like a melanin shield. They absorb anger that would otherwise go straight to the top. He puts it like this: if a white sheriff evicts a black family, it looks like a racial scandal. But if a black deputy does the exact same thing, it's more likely to be seen as just procedure. And in his view, this racial dynamic provides a kind of security for the system while creating an incredible psychological weight for the black proxy. Okay, so we've seen the paradox, the theory, and the exhibits. Where does this all lead? This brings us to the final section, the verdict on the system, and maybe a way to find some leverage. At the end of the day, the author's conclusion is that this whole extraction machine has one single point of failure. It relies on the proxies, the buffers, the shock absorbers, not recognizing the immense value of the stability they provide. Their unawareness, in his view, is the fuel that keeps the whole thing running. And he sums up the kind of mental shift that needs to happen with this quote. It's all about realizing that just being near power isn't the same as having it, that being close to the money isn't the same as owning it, and that providing all the stability without getting a piece of the pie, the equity, well, in his words, that's just maintenance of your own captivity. And this might be the most important takeaway from his whole analysis. The real leverage, he says, isn't about disruption or protest, it's about clarity. The real power comes from simply seeing the system for what it actually is. Because, he argues, once you start seeing the system clearly, you start asking a totally different question. It's no longer how can I get a promotion? It's where is the equity my labor creates? And that question, he believes, changes the entire game. And that leaves us with the big final question that hangs over this entire investigation. If the whole system is built on these human buffers, these human shock absorbers, what happens to the machine when its most critical components just stop absorbing the shock?